What's up, guys? We're about 6 days out from UFC Fight Night 125 Machida versus Anders. This looks like a pretty solid card. It's in Brazil. Those cards are usually pretty good. The UFC was grateful enough to give us a 6-fight main card, but I feel pretty guilty about only predicting 4 fights last week. So this time I will be predicting all 6 of these fights and the FS1 prelims. So you're welcome, guys. Hopefully I can give you some good insights. So without any further ado, let's get right into these UFC Fight Night 125 predictions. For the first fight on the FS1 prelims, we have Yuri Alcantara versus Joe Soto. I think this is a pretty close matchup. Both of these guys are pretty efficient with their submissions and ground game, but they're also pretty susceptible to getting submitted. So that kind of throws a wrench in the prediction right there. But I have to say, Yuri, he's getting up there in age, and he's progressively lost to worse opponents in his last 2 fights. Joe is coming off of a very quick submission loss to Brett Johns, but I have to give him the slight edge in this fight. So in terms of a prediction, I think Joe's going to take this one, but I think it could be a very close decision. This is probably one of the hardest fights on the entire card to predict, in my personal opinion, because it really just depends on who shows up that night. It could be Yuri, it could be Joe, but like I said, I give the slight edge to Joe, so my prediction is Joe by decision. Next up, we have Douglas Silva de Andrade versus Marlon Chito Vera. For Marlon Vera, I see this fight playing out a lot like the John Lineker fight, where he was facing a guy that was shorter than him, probably stronger than him, and a better striker. Marlon was basically just a punching bag for that entire fight. He didn't get finished, which actually surprised me, but he couldn't do anything on the feet. So with this matchup, I'm going to go with Douglas. I'm going to say that he outstrikes Marlon Vera and wins by decision. Next up, we have another close fight. Hopefully this is the last of the close fights in this event. We have Alan Patrick versus Damir Hadzovic. Both of these guys, their physical stats are almost identical, except Alan has a 4-inch reach advantage. They both have been knocked out by Mairbek Taisumov. That was both of their last losses. So I see this fight going. I think Alan Patrick is going to win by way of having more UFC experience. He's beat more quality opponents than Damir has. So I have to say Alan, this is going to go to a close decision, I think. So I'm going to say Alan wins by decision. Next up, we have the featured prelim, which is Sergio Moraes versus Tim Means. Tim is taking this fight on short notice. Sergio was originally supposed to fight that new Nurmagomedov guy that was coming into the UFC, but that fight fell through. So here we have Sergio Moraes versus Tim Means. I have to say, even though Tim is taking this fight on short notice, I think he's going to win. Sergio just recently got knocked out by Kamaru Usman. Kamaru doesn't exactly have the best striking, so I think Sergio showed that he has a bit of a striking deficiency. Tim is a very good striker. I would even call him a knockout artist. He is coming off of a loss to Bilal Muhammad, but it was very close. So in terms of this matchup, I have to say I see Tim winning by KO or TKO in the probably first or second round. I just think he has a longer reach. He's bigger, so I think he's going to be able to outstrike Sergio and get the knockout victory. For the first fight on the main card, we have Thiago Santos versus Anthony Smith. Anthony is on a pretty significant winning streak, and his last victory was a 3rd round, I think, knockout victory over Hector Lombard. And he said he finally wants to get a better, higher-ranked opponent, and he got that in Thiago Santos. But unfortunately for Lionheart Smith, I do not think he's going to win this fight. Anthony Smith has a real problem with slow starting. He's even admitted that himself. He's a very slow starter. Even in the Hector Lombard fight, he was losing, I'd say, for probably the first 2 rounds, and he had a huge reach advantage on Hector, but Hector was still able to land shots. So I think Thiago, who is most certainly a knockout artist, is going to be able to get the KO victory here early. I think he's a better striker. He's stronger. So I think if Anthony comes in here and tries to start slow, it's not going to be a good night for him. So with this prediction, I'm going to say Thiago Santos wins by first or second round knockout. Next up, we have a heavyweight bout. Number 15 ranked Timothy Johnson versus Marcelo Golm. Marcelo is taking this fight on short notice. Timothy was originally supposed to fight Luis Henrique. Timothy has had very close fights with some high quality opponents. Like, he lost by split decision to Alexander Volkov, and he actually beat Marcin Tybura, who recently fought Fabricio Verdum. So I think in terms of competition, he has an edge over Marcelo Golm. But Timothy, in his last fight, got knocked out by Junior Albini, who is another hard-hitting striker like Marcelo. Man, heavyweight fights are so hard to predict. I could see Timothy Johnson winning by decision, but I could also see Marcelo winning by knockout. At this particular moment, I'm leaning towards Marcelo winning by knockout. He's in his home country, and Timothy is coming off of a knockout loss. So I'm going to say Marcelo Golm wins by knockout. Next up on the main card, we have Mitchell Prazeres versus Desmond Green. Mitchell has been in the UFC for a lot longer than Desmond has, and he has very impressive victories over opponents like Gilbert Burns and Mairbek Taisimov. Desmond Green did have a very impressive victory over Josh Emmett, but he is coming off of a loss to Rustam Khabilov by decision. I see this fight going to decision, and I see the guy who's had more UFC experience, more impressive victories winning, which is Mitchell Prazeres. I could see Mitchell also winning by submission. He is pretty efficient on the ground, but I think the most likely outcome here is that Mitchell Prazeres wins by decision. Okay, next up we have a straight up mismatch, and I am completely willing to eat my words on this, but we have the number 1 ranked bantamweight Valentina Shevchenko versus Priscilla Cachoeira at 125. Valentina has been talking about how she wants to go down to 125 because that's her real weight class, and that she walks around at like 130. And I think that's a really good move for her because I think she's absolutely going to destroy the current 125-pound division. I think we're looking at a future flyweight women's champion right here. I would, if Priscilla was efficient on the ground, I would say, okay, if she takes down Valentina, we could be looking at some problems. But she's a striker. Half of her wins have come by knockout and half of her wins have come by decision. So I think if she tries to strike with Valentina, it's going to be a horrible night for her. Valentina has been talking about how she's going to win this fight by knockout in brutal fashion to show the 125 division that she's here and ready to be champion. And I agree with her. I think Valentina's probably going to win by knockout or TKO. So yeah, we're probably looking at a future women's flyweight champion here. So I have Valentina by knockout or TKO. For the co-main event, we have John Dodson versus Pedro Munoz. Pedro is coming off of a very impressive submission victory over Rob Font, and John Dodson is coming off of a decision loss to Marlon Moraes. John really hasn't found his footing at 135 yet. He was a much better flyweight, but I don't see him losing this fight. I feel like he has a huge advantage on the feet. He has heavy hands and good striking, and his takedown defense is probably going to be enough to stop Pedro's takedowns. Pedro actually submitted Rob Font in his last fight by hurting Rob on the feet and then getting him to the ground, but I don't think he's going to be able to hurt John Dodson. John has a pretty good chin, so I see John winning this fight on the feet and keeping it on the feet and ending up winning by decision here. And finally, for the main event of the evening, we have number 14 ranked Lyoto Machida versus Eric Anders. This is a pretty strange fight to me because I think that Lyoto is the perfect guy for the UFC to have a younger guy build his name off of beating. Like, Lyoto just got knocked out by Derek Brunson, and that definitely boosted Derek Brunson's how people thought about him. Obviously, Derek just got knocked out a couple days ago by Jacare, so he's back at the bottom. But his knockout victory over Lyoto propelled him in the rankings, obviously. I think that the UFC is definitely trying to do the same thing with Eric Anders. This is more of an opportunity for Eric than it is anything for Lyoto, but I think this is there's a gap between Lyoto and Eric that I don't know if Eric's going to be able to cross. Eric is a definite knockout artist, but he hasn't beat anywhere near the type of guys that Lyoto has beaten and I think still is. But Lyoto has a pretty bad chin, so could I see Eric winning by knockout? Yeah, I definitely could. But could I also see Lyoto winning by a decision? Yes, I could. I could see Lyoto counter-striking the entire fight, staying on his bicycle so he doesn't get connected by any huge shots. But I just don't know if he's going to be able to outlast the power that Eric has. Eric is a big, strong dude, and he's trying to make a name for himself. He realizes that this is a huge opportunity for him. So I'm leaning towards Eryk Anders winning by knockout. I think that this is his time and his time to make a statement in the division. I think the Lyoto that we see now is a shadow of his former self. His reaction time is slower. His evasiveness isn't as good as it used to be. So I could see Eryk Anders winning by knockout in this fight. That's going to be it for these predictions, guys. Thank you for listening to my insights if you watched this far. There's a lot of fights on this card that I think were pretty difficult to predict, but I gave my best efforts, and no matter what, I think we're going to see some great matchups and great performances. So I'll see you guys next time, and thanks again for watching.